Tons of playoff drama, a thrilling finish, but in the end, it was William Byron getting his 6th win of the season. Let's talk about NASCAR in the Lone Star State. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about NASCAR at Texas for the first race of the second round of the NASCAR playoffs, where William Byron was able to get up there and take another win away, getting his 6th win of the season, and Hendrick Motorsports' 300th win. We had tons of playoff drama with big crashes and major playoff implications with some big names. I want to start out by saying that this was one of the best Texas races I've seen in a long time. A lot of fans do not like this racetrack, including me. This definitely isn't my favorite NASCAR track on the schedule by any means. It's been decent the last few years with playoff drama. I think the playoffs has actually made this race more interesting through the years, especially with the old car, and then last year with the next-gen car, obviously, with multiple failures. You have tire failures at this track very frequently. You have many mechanical failures at this racetrack, and we saw a couple of those today that can sometimes hurt playoff drivers. In Texas, the same thing today. Multiple drivers with issues, mechanical failures, and tire issues were prevalent throughout the entire race. So I wasn't expecting that. The thing about this Texas race that was different from past Texas races since 2017 from this reconfiguration was the fact that there were comers and goers all day. There was passing. There was a couple of grooves. You could go up top a little bit, try to pass on the high groove, and you could stay on the bottom, try to pass on the bottom, and we saw that all day long. Hands down, this is probably the best race at Texas, personally, that I've watched. Since that reconfiguration in 2017, I really did enjoy this race. There were times where there wasn't a whole lot of passing, but sometimes you just get that at NASCAR races. But I thought this race was fun and interesting to watch from start to finish. But let's talk about the finish in of itself, because that's the big thing. I want to start out by talking about the Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace incident before the last caution. You have Bubba Wallace, Kyle Larson racing hard for the lead. This is for the win. These are the most two dominant cars all day. Bubba Wallace led, I believe he led over 100 laps in this race, but lost a little bit of track position. Like I said, there were comers and goers, but then Bubba Wallace was able to come up through the field at the end when Kyle Larson was leading. Once again, Bubba Wallace dominated the first portion, Kyle Larson dominated the second portion, but Bubba Wallace was coming back in the late stages. They're racing, and Kyle Larson gets sucked around by Bubba Wallace and slams into the outside wall, eliminating his chances of winning the race and really hurting him on the playoff grid as well, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So that's really unfortunate there for Kyle Larson. We don't see with these next-gen cars, with the Gen 6 car or even some other generation of race cars, that's kind of normal for cars to get sucked around. That was probably going to be considered a dirty move. But we saw Bubba Wallace, we saw other drivers kind of do this all day long on restarts and didn't have the same effect. So I'm surprised that was an issue for Kyle Larson, where it sucked him around. There really wasn't much Kyle Larson could have done in that situation, I think, unless, turn the wheel up and wreck Bubba with him, which probably wouldn't have been a good idea. Even Kyle Larson said in his interview he wasn't expecting that with these race cars. So definitely a different situation. Bubba Wallace, I think, if I look at the situation, I look at the wreck, I think you kind of have to put the blame on him because he run him all the way down to the track, sucked him around, nothing really Kyle Larson could do. But I would also, argue that that's just sort of a racing incident, right? I mean, you have to go for the win in these types of race cars where it's harder to pass than ever. And unfortunately, just in this rare instance, sucked Kyle Larson around. We saw this in Michigan a couple of times as well, where the driver on the inside would get sucked around. So it's definitely strange. These next-gen cars, we're still trying to figure them all out, but that's unfortunate for Kyle Larson for sure. Then we have the final restart. Bubba Wallace on the outside, Chase Briscoe on the inside trying to go for his second career win, and then you have William Byron in the second row. And what happened was the 14 and the 23 got side by side. The 23, once again, probably the fastest car out of all four of these race cars at the front. Bubba Wallace continuing to just side draft off of him. That allowed the 24 to get to the inside, and then eventually the 23 tried to do what he did to Kyle Larson, tried to kind of get right there on him, not suck him around, but tried to get right there on him and take the air off his nose. But it just didn't work out at all for Bubba Wallace. William Byron was able to come out the winner at Texas and get his 6th win of the season, which is very impressive, and win number 300 for Hendrick Motorsports. William Byron is a driver that I think is a serious championship threat right now. I've been saying this all year long. You can look at Denny Hamlin. You can look at Martin Truex Jr., who's having sort of a rough playoffs. But you look at William Byron, he kind of sneaks up there and gets these wins, using strategy to get some of these wins. But you go back to Watkins Glen where he dominated. He's winning at multiple variety of different racetracks. That's usually a good sign. It's also a good sign when you're capitalizing on days that you probably shouldn't have won. William Byron probably shouldn't have won this race. He probably wouldn't have if it weren't for late race restarts. Multiple of William Byron's wins have come off late race restarts. That shows that that team can do good in high pressure situations. That's why I think they're a major championship threat as it looks right now. Let's go through the entire top 10. So we talked about the finish. Let's talk about the top 10. You have William Byron obviously getting his 6th win of the season. Ross Chastain was able to get up there and get a solid 2nd place finish. He was fast all day long as well, stayed in the top 10. I believe he had some issues with the throttle, so it was very impressive that he was able to stay in the top 2 all day long and finish 2nd. A very solid run for Ross Chastain. Got some points out of it. And once again, we'll get more in the playoff grid in just a little bit. Bubba Wallace finishing in the 3rd position. I know he's very disappointed in that finish because he had such a fast race car all day long. Had a great shot to go for the victory, but Bubba Wallace take the 3rd place. You're going to get some points out of it. He's 2 points below the cut right now, but it could be way worse for him. Solid day for Bubba, getting some stage points and getting a top 3 finish today. Christopher Bell, once again, we're talking about Christopher Bell not capitalizing on certain things all season long. That kind of stayed true today until the very end of the race where we had those late race restarts. Christopher Bell was able to get all the way back up to 4th. Solid run for Christopher Bell. Take a 4th place finish, get those points. Denny Hamlin had trouble at the beginning of the race, had a little bit of damage on the race car. It seemed to change his handling a little bit, especially right when he come off of pit road from that incident where Ty Gibbs was, for some reason, on the inside lane of pit road. He had plenty of room to move up. Didn't, and then kind of, Denny Hamlin coming out pit road and Ty Gibbs door slammed Denny Hamlin, giving Denny Hamlin a bunch of damage on the right side of the car. So that was definitely a strange incident for sure. I think Ty Gibbs has had some trouble on pit road before at this racetrack in the Cup Series. But Denny Hamlin was able to capitalize on it all day long, stay in the top 5, stay in the top 10 for a majority of the race, gets a solid top 5th place finish tonight. Kevin Harvick, I'll be honest, I didn't see him running up front. Wasn't that fast in practice, wasn't that fast in qualifying, but was able to get up there and finish in the 6th position. A solid run for Kevin Harvick in the 4 car. Brad Keselowski, another one of those playoff drivers, started up front, started in the top 3, faded just a little bit, but was around a 7th place car, I would say, and finished in the 7th position. Daniel Suarez actually spun earlier on in this race, comes all the way back up to finish in the 8th position. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., another solid run, back in the 9th position, back in the top 10. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was solid run for the 47 team. They've been fast, consistent all season long. And Chase Briscoe, once again, on the older tires, was able to finish in the 10th position after restarting 2nd on that final restart with 6 laps to go. Another driver I want to mention, Chase Elliott finishing in the 11th position, but Eric Jones had some issues later on in the race, but at the first portions of the race, he was one of the fastest race cars. Looked like he would have had a shot to go up there and catch one of the leaders at one point. So really impressive what Eric Jones has been able to do with this season. Everybody talked about, hey, this is a throwaway season for the whole Legacy Motor Club team. Not for Eric Jones. He's still out there going for wins, been running good the last few weeks, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was able to pull out a win before this season's over. But that brings up the playoff grid. Let's get into all the playoff drama. Here it is. William Byron with his win today punches his ticket into the next round of the NASCAR playoffs. He's going to round 8, but even bigger than that, he gets 5 more bonus points going into that next round with this win. He's got 6 wins. That's 30 bonus points plus the stage wins that he has. William Byron has a good cushion, I think, going into that next round. He's going to have a major advantage over everybody else going into the round of 8 in 2 weeks. So it should be exciting. Another way this is a big win for William Byron is because he no longer has to deal with Talladega and the Roval. And I think Talladega is a huge wild card. I think the Roval's sort of less a wild card now that it's, not a very new race anymore. We've raced at this track before. William Byron gets to skip Talladega and skip the Charlotte Road Course as far as worrying about missing out on points. So that's a solid day for William Byron for sure. Denny Hamlin, 37 points above. That's a pretty good cushion. I'm not going to lie. Denny Hamlin, that's a pretty nice cushion. Gives him a good chance to make it. You just don't wreck out in Talladega early. Try not to wreck out in Talladega early. Hamlin usually does a good job at not wrecking at Talladega, has wins there, has 3 Daytona 500s. Talladega is his style of racing, so I expect Denny Hamlin to have a solid run. You have Chris Buescher, Daytona winner a few weeks ago. That gives me confidence with him going over to Talladega. How good can he run? He's got Brad Keselowski, one of the best pushers at those plate tracks, as his teammate. I'm confident in what Chris Buescher can do. Christopher Bell, 20 points above with that, salvaging that 4th place finish today. Martin Truex Jr., 19 points above. Not the best day for Martin Truex Jr. Did not finish in the top 10. Spun a couple of times today at Texas. These playoffs have been rocky for him. You get an advantage when you do good in the regular season, right? I mean, he got the 3 race wins. That's 15 bonus points plus the 15 bonus points for winning the regular season championship and all that together. That gives him that cushion, but he's kind of eating through it. He keeps having trouble. He keeps not having the pace that he had all summer long. He was the guy to beat all summer long. Martin Truex Jr. has not been that fast since Darlington at the start of the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see what he can do moving forward. Denny Hamlin, William Byron have certainly stepped up, and Martin Truex Jr. seems to have certainly taken a step back, at least from what we've seen in the first 4 races. Ross Chastain capitalizing on some decent finishes, 12 points above. Brad Keselowski, 8 over. Kyle Larson, after getting involved in that wreck, one that would say is a championship favorite, 4 wins this season. Only 2 points above right now. That is not safe at all. That's 2 stage points. That's 2 positions on the racetrack in a stage or in the race results that could knock Kyle Larson out of the round of 8, which would certainly be an upset. Bubba Wallace, 2 points below. And the reason Bubba Wallace got a 3rd place finish and is still 2 points below is because he didn't have the advantage from the regular season. I believe he had 0 bonus points, 0 stage wins, and 0 bonus points going into this year's playoffs. That's a disadvantage for Bubba Wallace, not performing as good in the regular season, but they're able to sneak by. They're still in contention to get in. Bubba Wallace has got a win at Talladega and is solid at Talladega. It'll be interesting to see what he can do next week at Talladega. Tyler Reddick, 3 points below the cut line right now. Ryan Blaney, 11 points below. That's a little bit more scary if you're Ryan Blaney. You know, it's still one stage, still a stage and a half, but not a guaranteed spot in. You're going to have to make up some points with the stages. Try to run well next week at Talladega in the Roval. Got caught up in a wreck today. We'll take a look at that. Ryan Blaney was running decent. And then, unfortunately, a big pile up where a bunch of drivers slammed into the wall on one of the restarts, and Ryan Blaney was one of them. Then he got turned sideways. That definitely hurt Ryan Blaney's chances. So 11 points out. It puts you in a position where you don't entirely have control over everything. And I've said this in the past. You want to have control over everything in these playoffs. And sure, you know, Ryan Blaney can go out there next week and do very good at Talladega. He has multiple wins in the Talladega Fall Race. That's because he's very good at that type of racing, has a lot of stage points, has a lot of decent finishes at those type of racetracks. He might be one of the best at the crazy finishes at Talladega, but it puts you in a situation to where you really do need to go get some points, and you don't have that cushion at all. If you're Ryan Blaney, you're behind. Kyle Busch, same type situation. I believe he was 10, 12 points in at one point today. Decides to wreck before the end of the first stage, so gets no stage points and gets a bad finish, 3rd to last. So Kyle Busch will get 3 points on the day, putting him 17 points below. It would have been more if it wasn't for a couple of those other wrecks like Martin Truex Jr., Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. Those guys wrecking out kind of was an advantage for Kyle Busch because that helped him stay in, 17 points out. It's not a must-win by any means, but now, same situation as Blaney, you have to go race. He has to go race at Talladega. He can't do what Denny Hamlin can do, which is sit back to the end and go for the win. He can't do that. He can't afford to do that. He has to go for stage wins and a decent finish at Talladega, which puts you in a risky situation at those types of racetracks. Same thing with the Roval. You get late race cautions, it can cause a lot of trouble. But if you're Kyle Busch, you have to go for those points now. If you're only 17 below, which is certainly not good, get involved in that wreck. And I'll say this for Kyle Busch. I think he's frustrated, and he said in his interview that he just wants to stop trying and just ride behind the guy. I think he's frustrated because these cars are so different from the previous cars, and you can't race them a certain amount. You have to race them the way they're supposed to. You can't race them too hard, and I think Kyle Busch is trying to get more out of the car than he can get. This isn't a Joe Gibbs Toyota anymore, and it's unfortunate for him because it's cost him a lot this season. You go back to New Hampshire. You go back to Pocono when he slammed in the wall. You go back to Michigan when he wrecked himself early. That has really hurt Kyle Busch this season. Wrecking out is never good, obviously, and it's really hurt Kyle this year, cost him a ton of points. But that's it. That's all there's to talk about after one of my favorite races at Texas in the last, 5-6 years. I thought it was exciting. We do go to Talladega next week, the big Talladega Motor Speedway. We'll have to take a look at that. It'll be exciting. It'll be fun. And, of course, I'll do a video Dirty Air after that. Like and subscribe if you like the video. And, of course, share the video. I really do appreciate it if you do. And, of course, about Kyle Busch wrecking out early. Again, let's get rowdy.